Hey guys, Coach Strong here, presenting you with your first video for our ecology unit. The title of this will be Organisms and the Environment. There will be 4 different subtopics, and I know it will seem like a lot of information, but do not worry, we will be going over everything in class. Just a reminder, do not forget to write down everything you see. I will let you know what pictures you need to draw, and if you have any questions, please make sure you ask. So the first subtopic for this video will cover relationships in ecosystems. Now, some of this should be familiar to you from what you have discussed in previous grades, and because of that, I'm going to go straight to what should be new for you this year, which is symbiotic relationships. All symbiotic or symbiosis means is just a relationship, a close relationship between two species. There are 3 in particular that you guys need to know: mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Please make sure you get this information written down. I also included the faces in the bottom right corner, which I think you should include in your notes as well. It definitely helps whenever you're trying to remember. If you can picture these faces with the type of relationship, it'll help you probably learn them a little bit quicker. Another thing to keep in mind, because we will be going over a lot of examples in class, is that an organism can play more than one role in its ecosystem. That really just depends on where it's located in its food web. Alright, so the second topic we're going to tackle in this video involves changes in ecosystems. First thing you should be able to do is identify different biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic being anything that's living or once living, and abiotic being anything that's non-living. You do have some examples in this box that you need to write down, but keep in mind this is a short list, and there are other things that fall under each of these categories. Another thing that you need to consider is that when changes occur within certain abiotic factors, there are biotic and abiotic factors that are affected as a result. Listed here are 3 particular abiotic factors that can influence both biotic and abiotic factors in ecosystems. Alright, so once you know what abiotic and biotic factors are, you should be able to recognize how they influence organisms. Now, I have 3 examples listed here. I would like for you, as I go through these, to think about real-world examples from a food web or an ecosystem that would fit under each of these points. So, when biotic and abiotic factors become limited, we end up with populations competing over those limited resources. You also have instances where if there is a change in population, whether it be positive or negative, any populations that interact with that particular one that is changing ultimately are affected. And finally, when we introduce a new species into an ecosystem, all of the existing populations are greatly impacted, specifically because new species can outcompete the ones that were already there. So I challenge you to try and come up with specific examples of each of these. I will probably be asking you to share them in class, so make sure you come prepared. We're now moving on to our third topic, which is focused on environmental change and how that affects organisms and populations. So, first you need to understand what an environmental change is. That's any change in the environment that has an effect on the survival of the organisms within that environment. We have both short and long-term environmental changes. Short-term being those that happen very quickly, so there's not really any time to adapt, and long-term changes happening over a longer period of time, so organisms do have an opportunity to adapt to those changes. We'll get more into that in a minute, but first let's see some examples of short and long-term changes. Okay, so here we have some examples of different environmental changes. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I do expect for you to write down the ones in the table and the ones that I have added to the right and left of the table. You also need to keep in mind as you write these down and look back over them that both short and long-term changes can occur naturally, or they can be influenced by human activity. So as you go through these examples, try and see if you can pick out which ones are happening naturally and which ones are caused by humans. As 8th graders, you do need to know how these environmental changes affect and impact organisms' traits over time. Mainly that with short-term changes, it happens too quickly for there to actually be any adaptation in traits. But with long-term changes, we end up seeing survival of the fittest or natural selection, which you have heard in previous grades. And that really just means that the organisms that are best adapted will survive and pass on those traits, and the ones that are not will ultimately be eliminated from the population. So our last topic is somewhat minor compared to the other three, but it is still something that you all are responsible for knowing, and that involves human dependence and modification of ocean systems. So we want to recognize that we as humans depend on the ocean for different things. Food, transportation, weather, recreation are just a few of the examples, and that we as humans have a tendency to change the environment that we live in, and while some of these are positive changes, mostly they have a negative impact on the environment and the other organisms that live in those environments. Okay, so here we have a list of modifications humans have made to our ocean systems. They are both positive and negative, and you are responsible for being able to identify both. Not only do you need to write down this information, but you also need to make sure you have the information in the table. So that is it for this video. I know that a lot of information was thrown at you, but just keep in mind that we will be doing a lot of different activities for all of these topics. You need to make sure you watch it, make sure you get your notes taken care of, and make sure you're looking over these notes as we start to discuss this information in class.